In this video, I'm going to lay out some quotes and the final cost I paid for a new dropped curb access to my property, which is in rural southern England. My council doesn't do dropped curbs, so I had to use a contractor. I'm building a garage in behind these trees in the garden, and therefore I need a new access to get to it. There is a gate off to the right there, which I currently use, but technically I'm not allowed to because it doesn't have a dropped curb. The garden here is off to the side of the house, so it does have quite a lot of road frontage, so I've decided not to use that gate, bring the drop curb further along the roadside, along the property, which will mean the garage gets pushed further into the corner where the gate currently is. So that means the driveway will be going here, where this little gate is and the fence currently are. I'm doing the drop curb first as it's basically completely independent of the rest of the works and it's relatively low cost compared to the rest of the building. So if everything hits the fan, there's minimal sunk cost has gone into this curb. I already had planning permission for the garage, and that specifically included new access and a dropped curb as part of that. So it was all bundled together. These are the quotes I had at the end of 2024. I was thinking of going with supplier 2. They would require me to do the permit. And I had a look at it, the application form. It's designed to be filled out by contractors. It asks things like, what training courses have you done? And it also required drawings, which I didn't know what the requirements were for putting in drawings. There's also a risk that because the permit was only valid for 3 months, if I filled out the permit and then the contractor wasn't available, that risk would be on me. I didn't want to have to pay for another permit because they're a few £100. I'd rather that risk was on the complier, that they applied for the permit and they fitted it in their schedule. Supplier 1 wanted to do the curb with also laying a driveway at the same time. They wanted to do it as like a combined package. I didn't want to do that at this stage because I didn't know, the final position of the driveway in relation to where the garage is going, and I also wanted to spend a bit more time working out what materials I want to use for the driveway. I don't necessarily just want it to be tarmac. But for the moment, I just wanted the curb, so that was a bit of a downer for me for supplier 1, and they only communicated over WhatsApp, which I found quite tricky. Supplier 3 was a smaller business. Their cost for doing the permit was actually less than the cost of the permit with the council, so I was a bit suspicious. Their price seemed suspiciously low, potentially quite out of date as well. Supplier 4 seemed to be the most organised business. They would do the permit and drawings themselves on my behalf for a fee. And then there were 3 other suppliers I contacted that never replied to quote. So in the end, I chose supplier 4. Looking at this now, it may be quite weird to try and justify why I went for what was the most expensive quote on paper for what I'd be getting at the end of the day was a dropped curb. But I've added a column here, which is basically the hassle risk column. And it basically came down to my decision being, would I pay £800 more than supplier 2 for an easy experience with supplier 4? And the answer was ultimately yes, because at the same time as organising these drop curbs, I was trying to organise and go through the same process with the whole garage as well. So in the grand scheme of things, an extra £800 is a bit of a drop in the ocean, to be honest, for a lot less perceived hassle. One thing I found when talking through the quotes with businesses, the terminology is quite hard and you've got to pay attention. You've got dropped curbs, which are the flat ones, and dropper curbs are the sloping ones. So all of the quotes I had to confirm actually what we were talking about in terms of the number of curbs. The standard seems to be a 3 dropped curb, which means 3 dropped and 2 droppers. Therefore, 5 curbstones are affected across the full width. Once I clarified that I wanted 4 dropped and 2 dropper, that increased the quote by about £250 to £400. It seems to be what it costs on average for an extra curb. On to the actual works now. So from the quote stage to actually finishing the curb took 4 months. I paid for the permit and the drawings fee up front. And then a man from the highways came the next week, knocked on the door to do an assessment basically and approve it. Our main driveway in front of the house, it was a single driveway, and then previous owners have expanded it to the width of 2 cars with tarmac, but they hadn't extended the drop curb. And then we share that driveway also with a neighbour, so we have 3 dropped curbs each side, so 6 in total. And the highways man assumed that we'd be extending our side a bit further to make it full width of the double driveway, which is not the case. This is a new access further up the road a bit. So I'm glad he knocked on the door so I could explain what we were actually doing. I initially hadn't suspected any issues because we've had a lot of utilities works, electrics, broadband and things digging up the pavements in recent years, and they've never dug up the bit next to where I was going to put the drop curb. So I knew there wasn't anything going to be under there, and I made sure to avoid the lamppost as well. I decided on going for 4 dropped curbs for better turning access really, because defenders don't really do that well on sharp corners. Our current drive is 3 dropped curbs, and the house is not parallel. The front face of the house is not parallel with the road. So it's actually pointing the wrong way. So when you try and get on the driveway, you've got a 120-degree turn to get onto the driveway in front of the house. So I have to mount the curb to do that in a Defender. The fact that this new access will be 90 degrees, I think having an extra curb will make it fine. So I think 4 is enough. So after that was approved, the contractors were booked in and then they no-showed on the day. I had to contact them, and a few days later they got back to me and said that a lot of people were off work sick and very sorry, and then they scheduled in the work for a month later. When that next date finally arrived, they did turn up on day 1. They dropped off the materials. They initially assumed also that the driveway was being widened in front of a house, so I also then had to go and explain where the real location was, and they had to shift all their blocks and stuff a bit further up the road. I worked out which exact curbstones to be done, and then they did some spray painting on the lines. Day 2, they came along, they did all the digging up, current tarmac, and then concreting in the curbstones. That then dried or cured, and then day 3 they did the final tarmacking. In total, I estimate they probably did about 8 hours work. So in all, it was a 3-day process. They did have a few things like grab lorries turn up, a bit of noise, etc., but the impact was generally minimal. It's worth talking about the requirements of driveways in terms of planning restrictions, because different councils have got different restrictions, guidelines on creating access. In general, though, there's a few things that do need a bit of consideration. No obstruction higher than 50 centimetres to 1 metre either side of the drop curb, known as the visibility displays, to a distance of kind of 2 to 3 metres either side of the driveway centre line. And no surface water is allowed to run off your property to the highway, so the driveway needs kind of an ACO drain or something similar. Driveway also needs to be a minimum 6 metres back from the carriageway, or minimum depth of 6 metres back from the carriageway, to allow parking a car without blocking the pavement. The driveway also has to be made of consolidated material, i.e. not gravel, so it can get dragged out onto the road. I'm sure we've all seen that. Once you're aware of these kind of factors, then you start paying attention to a lot of existing properties and realising that so many old properties don't actually meet these requirements. But hey-ho, them's the rules that you got to follow if you want the new stuff. So it's all done, and I haven't got a driveway in yet. It's just a curb to nowhere. Plan on putting the driveway in after the garage is built, because I have Land Rovers, which have the turning circle of an oil tanker, and the driveway is going to be curved to get from this drop curb round the tree here to the garage. I actually need to work out where the wheels naturally want to travel before I start digging. I don't want to build a driveway and then find out it's a really tight, difficult turn. There's a design concept here called the desire path. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. This is the concept in the design where the paths should be built where people actually want to walk. People want to walk from A to B in the shortest possible distance using straight lines. Now, people go through hedges, across grass. I want the driveway to take this kind of philosophy. I want to know where the Land Rovers naturally want to take their path, put their wheels down, and I want to build a driveway to where the wheels fall. Whether in the short term having a drop curb access into grass actually results in a non-compliant driveway will remain to be seen. It may depend on how much of a mess the contractors make when they're doing the groundworks for the garage. There's going to be a lot of muck to shift. So hopefully the garage will be done within the next 9 months or so, and I'll be able to make a start on the driveway. I'm not sure on the material for the driveway yet. Maybe some kind of stone, make up the 6 metres to a gate as per the requirements, and then beyond that some other kind of material that's potentially a bit cheaper. I am expecting to do the driveway work myself to save on cost. Famous last words. So the final cost was £3,350 for a 4-dropped curb, which is 6 curbstones in total. The cost of my planning permission for the garage, which included this drop curb, was £1,300 for the architect drawings and planning fee. You could say the planning cost for the drop curb was free, as it was bundled into the application for the garage, or it could be a few £100 more on top of that £3,300 if you're doing it separately. Depends how you do it, I guess. What's kind of funny with this whole process is you spend all that money and it's not even yours. It belongs to the highways or the council, but of course it does add value to your property and it is a necessity for this kind of project. It's just one of those things, you make the bank transfer and you're like, what am I actually paying for here? So there we go. That's quite a lot of money. That's more than I was expecting. I'm waiting for all the "you what, mate, you've been had" comments. Hopefully I've laid out my decision making enough about why I chose the quote I did. Inflation in construction in general has been pretty high in recent years. I follow the Real Life Architect channel. He says construction material costs 50% inflation since 2018. So think about 6 or 7 years ago, if it was a £2,000 cost then, it'd be a £3,000 cost now. So I made this video because I think the internet's very out of date on costs, so I just wanted to throw some real world experience into the mix. Hopefully this year the garage will be built. I have a contractor lined up for that and it will be documented on this channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.